Well, happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you had a wonderful weekend full of the usual, of family and food and football and traveling. It's one of those holidays that we try to compress so much into a few days. How many of you traveled somewhere for Thanksgiving? How many of you are still traveling there and like you haven't gone home, like you still have more traveling to do? See, I traveled, we went to go visit my wife's family up in Colorado, and I drove back last night just to get here in time to preach. And what's funny, we get there early, we unloaded the car, I'm sitting there on the couch, and I'm watching a certain football game that happened last night. You always spot them. So, and my daughter asked me, who do you want to win, LSU or A&M? And see, I went to Baylor, and so I'm used to losing football games, and so, which we did, and but I said not LSU, and my wife said, notice he didn't say he wanted A&M to win, and I said, so why do you want A&M to win? My daughter asked, why do you want A&M to win? I said, well, here's the deal. Kingston has a ton of Aggies at the church, and every time the Aggies lose on Saturday, they show up grumpy to church on Sunday morning. And I don't get to preach very often, so I want them in a good mood for when I'm preaching. And so maybe they'll laugh at my jokes and all that stuff. So no, Thanksgiving is one of those times where it's an interesting window into, we get together with people who are family and friends, and we try to cobble together a meal. A whole bunch of people bring in different parts. And I've watched this happen for so many years. I've decided that I almost want to develop a psychology exam, like a personality test, based on what you are asked to bring at a Thanksgiving feast. Like, I'm pretty sure you can gauge how your reliability, like what you can be trusted to bring based on what they ask you. I've decided first, every family or group has one group of people. There's could be one person or a group of people, and they have two responsibilities. One of them is to rule the kitchen with an iron fist. Okay, their job is to constantly complain that no one is helping them. And then two, when someone does help them, to tell them they're doing it wrong, right? You know who you are, and you know who had it done to you, right? So the other thing is, when you decide to ask for something, you can tell based on the initial response, the word they say. So if you say, can I bring something to Thanksgiving, and they say, ooh, like, that's a good sign. If they say, oh, that's a bad sign. Okay, can I bring something? Oh, I wasn't prepared for that, and we may be, and there's a couple of core things you have to get right. If you cook the turkey, if you've been asked to bring the turkey 2 years in a row, guess what? You're like on varsity Thanksgiving, okay? You are a starter, you're bringing your A game, and you can be trusted. If you've been asked to bring something that there's redundancy for, like, oh, where someone's bringing potatoes, why don't you bring some potatoes? Either we're not sure of your performance, or someone else dropped the ball last year, and we're trying to look for, maybe you have your chance to prove yourself and get in the game when this person drops the ball. See, my family, we're niche. We're like a niche thing. We're the dessert people. My wife is a baker, and she loves baking, and my kids do too. And so every holiday starts off with my wife making her world-famous cinnamon rolls, which I've dubbed Cinnamana, because it is bread from heaven, and it only lasts the day. And and then we just make desserts. We make desserts like crazy. And all my family lives out of town, and so Kingston is my family, and my kids have all these surrogate cousins and aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas. And so y'all have been giving them recipes, and we have been making them, and we have been winning Thanksgiving. Okay? Because there's a subtle competition at the dessert table, right? Like, you look at the dessert table, everyone brings desserts, and whichever one people are willing to eat after already stuffed themselves with food, that's the good stuff. If you leave Thanksgiving with a pie you made, then you did something wrong, right? You need to, well, I decided to test it this year. I decided to test where I knew I was riding my family's coattails, and I wanted to see where I stood personally. And I asked what I could bring to Thanksgiving. Yeah, oh. You know what I got? Oh, yeah, Steve, you could bring some ice, right? Like, that's like the lowest rung. Like, I was prepared for them to tell me, the more specific they get in what you can bring, like if it's store-bought, problem. If they tell you what aisle it's on from a specific store, bring this thing from this store in this aisle. But when they tell you to bring ice, there's like no lower, the only rung below, that's the lowest rung on the food thing. Everything beyond that, the only thing worse that you could be asked to invite to Thanksgiving is if someone asks you to bring furniture. Okay? What can I bring to Thanksgiving? You can bring a chair. Like, we need extra chairs. Like, they're so worried about you bringing something that someone might ingest. Okay? We can't trust you with that, right? Someone might put that to their face, and we don't know how that's going to turn out. So you just bring furniture. That would be fine. So it's a little window into what you can be relied upon, and if you host it, who you are going to rely upon to make a good Thanksgiving meal. You know, it's a microcosm of life. That's why it serves as a wonderful little personality test. All of us have assumptions we make about what will constitute who we can rely upon in life. Who can be counted upon to make things happen. We look at life and we want it to turn out well. We hope for happiness and joy and peace and contentment and fulfillment, all of those things, and we wonder what it's going to take to make it happen. And the world makes us a lot of promises, and we have to make a decision. What are we going to rely upon? Well, today we're going to conclude our study of the parables, and we're going to look specifically at a parable that Jesus tells about the right and wrong people to rely upon. We're going to be in Luke chapter 18. And as you turn there, I want to highlight something that's going on at Kingston right now. So Luke chapter 18, but also if you notice out in the foyer or narthex or whatever we call that, out there, we're entering the season of Advent. Thanksgiving is over. We're looking forward to Christmas. And Advent is the time to celebrate the Christmas season. A lot of us say Jesus is the reason for the season, but sometimes we no further sign that we can be riding the culture's coattails that we follow the culture's lead. Take time, set aside some time to think about, reorient your life around what it means to be a follower of Jesus and what this season means. And to help you, we prepared an Advent devotional guide. It's for families, so if you have kids, works great. If you don't have kids, works great too. There's even a calendar on the back. And so be sure to grab one as you go out. Make sure when you come to church on Christmas Day in 4 weeks, don't say, I missed it. I missed a chance. Don't say, it's in my rearview mirror. Be able to celebrate because you've thought deeply about what we're intending to celebrate. All right? Luke chapter 18, Jesus tells a parable. Verse 9, he says, he also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and looked down on everyone else. I love this. Luke starts the parable, and Jesus is going to end it. Some parables are hard to understand with, like, I'm not sure what this means, and we should wrestle with it. They want to make sure you get this, okay? You do not miss this. Luke says, this parable is for people who rely upon themselves and look down on other people. And Jesus ends it by telling you, this is who it's for and what's going to happen when you do that. So please don't miss the point. The point is about reliance. Who do you rely upon, and how do you see yourself and God and other people? Okay? If that's all you hear, then we can just go to get some lunch right now. We're just done early. But the content, the point of the parable looks like this. Jesus tells the story of two men who go to the temple to pray. Look at verse 10. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee was standing and praying like this about himself. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, greedy, unrighteous, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of everything I get. So he's up there and he's celebrating all that he does well, right? This guy is pious. He goes above and beyond what God has commanded. Jewish law required every Jewish person to fast once a year, okay, on the Day of Atonement. This guy fasts twice a week. He does 100 times more than he's supposed to do. And not just that, he tithes, not just on his paycheck, he tithes on everything he gets. Which means he's going above and beyond. You are supposed to tithe. When God blesses you, it's an act of worship to say that you're trusting not in your paycheck, but in God who provides it as an act of gratitude. You're supposed to be doing that. But he tithes on everything, right? He gets, someone brings him over a pie, he gives 1/10 of it to the church. Someone gives Halloween candy, 10% to the church. If anyone wants to do that, my office is at the end. If you have extra candy lying around that you would like to tithe, I mean, you're not supposed to. That's the point of the parable. You're not supposed to. But if you want to, my office is at the exact other end of the building, and all drop-offs will be handed out down there. But he says, look at all I'm doing. I've done so much. This is why he believes he is the source of all the things that he has going on in his life. He looks at himself, he looks around, he realizes, I got it pretty good, and it's all because of me. And then Jesus tells the story of another man. Verse 13. But a tax collector, standing far off, would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest, saying, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. See the contrast? The Pharisee stood proudly, and the Pharisee and the tax collector stood apart and humbled himself. The Pharisee thought he was better than everybody else. The tax collector wouldn't even lift his eyes to heaven. And he cried out for mercy. God, have mercy. Be merciful to me, a sinner. The tax collector knows who to trust. He's not trusting himself, he's trusting in God, and he cries out to God for mercy. Now, mercy is one of those words. It's a church word we say a lot, and we aren't always clear about the definition. And so it's one of those words I always like to stop and give you the definitions just so we make sure. We sang about it today. It's a wonderful song we sang. But there are 3 dimensions to mercy. There are 3 parts of the definition. Mercy means not receiving a bad thing you do deserve. Okay, that is what mercy means. Not receiving a bad thing you do deserve. Its parallel concept and the opposite side of the same coin as mercy is grace. Grace is very similar, but grace is the opposite. Okay, grace means receiving a good thing you don't deserve. Do you see the similarities and the differences? Do you see how they kind of are polar opposites and opposite sides of the same coin? Mercy is when you don't receive a bad thing you do deserve, and the act of getting mercy is grace. It is a gift, a good gift that you don't deserve. And so they're similar but not the same. He cries out for mercy. He knows he has failed. He knows what he deserves because of it, and he cries out to God to give it. And then finally, Jesus tells us the conclusion. He spells it out in verse 14. I tell you, this one went down to his house justified rather than that one, because everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Justified, the one who, this guy went home justified means made right, made righteous. Again, church word that we sometimes think that means just forgiven and we're going to heaven when we die. It's true. But righteous means more than that. It means accepted by God. It means blessed. It means worthy. If you wanted to put a secular term in it, it was the word that a Jewish man would say to mean successful. What would make you feel like you were successful in life, that your life was working out the way you thought, that you were blessed by God and approved by God and worthy to God? The Pharisee thought he had it. The Pharisee walked up and said, I do all this stuff, I have earned your favor, and I am rightly blessed. The tax collector knew he wasn't blessed, and he came begging for it. And he knew that the gift that he received would be only mercy. And Jesus said, that man and not the Pharisee went home blessed in the position of being worthy and approved by God and able to be the person God was calling them to be. Now, if I asked you right now, if I paused the sermon now and said, who are you more like? Are you more like the Pharisee or the tax collector? It would be one of those things where we would be tempted to say, oh, I'm totally not the Pharisee. You know, it's one of those church answers. We know if the children's sermon, the answer is not Jesus, the answer is never the Pharisees, right? Are you more like the Pharisees? Yeah, totally me. No one says that. The Pharisees are like the Washington Generals of the New Testament, right? Does anyone remember who the Washington Generals are? Who are the Washington Generals? Who do they play? The Harlem Globetrotters. And so what do the Washington Generals always do? They lose. The point of the Washington Generals is they lose to the Harlem Globetrotters. And so the Pharisees are the Washington Generals of the New Testament. They're always going to lose, so you never pick the Pharisees. Okay? And in fact, a lot of times we have learned to ape the tax collector. We say things like that are the church answer. Oh, I know that I don't bring anything to the table, and I know that I'm unworthy, and I know that I don't merit the mercy of God. We say all of the right things because we know we're not supposed to be the Pharisee, and we're supposed to be like the tax collector. But the truth is, if I took the names off the table and just looked at what he did, I bet you would discern that the symptoms of self-righteousness are filtered into our life more than we care to realize. This idea of trusting and relying upon yourself for the world to turn out the way you want it to do, and to experience the blessings and the success and the meaning that you want. And that's what I want to do today. I want us to look closely at this. I want to look at these words, and I want us to take a little test. Not to ask if you're a Pharisee, but to look at what the Pharisee was doing and to see if these aren't representative of who we are as well. So let's look at the diagnosis of self-righteousness. Okay, how can you tell if you have it? If this is a symptom checker, what would you input to see if it happens? Well, let's look at what the Pharisee does. The first thing, self-righteousness focuses on comparison. Okay, the Pharisee goes up to the Temple Mount and he's praying, and he only notices how he's different from other people. Let me explain to you. I'm so glad I'm not like anybody else. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, and I'm definitely not like that guy. Okay, he's found a way to compare himself to other people. And it's one of the chief signs and problems and symptoms of self-righteousness is comparison. You've heard maybe comparison's the thief of joy. Well, guess what? Comparison is the thief of righteousness too. It's one of the chief ways in which we look at the world and use it sinfully. In 1 John 2:16, John is talking about the problem with a sinful approach to the world, and he gives 3 categories for what constitute a sinful view of the world. He says, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride in one's possessions is not from the Father, but is from the world. He's saying, notice it's not things in the world, it's how you look at the world. Many of you know that in a former life I was a language professor in the university, and so let me give you a Greek word here, a Greek translation. The phrase, the pride in one's own possession, the CSB kind of gets wrong. CSB is a wonderful translation. The literal translation is the boastful pride of life. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. These 3 things constitute a sinful view of the world that a lot of people use. In fact, when I describe them, you'll say, oh, this is me. This is me. So the lust of the flesh. The lust of the flesh is the belief that you will find meaning and purpose and fulfillment through seeking pleasure. Through pleasure. That the reason why you are unhappy is you are lacking some experience. And if you could just have that experience, you would experience all the joy and peace and fulfillment and contentment that you long for in life. Experience. Anytime someone makes a bucket list and says, "Oh, I can't wait to do this," it's a little coin in the bank of the lust of the flesh. The lust of the eyes. If you think it's the idea that you will be fulfilled if you acquire possessions. That what you're missing is all the stuff of the world. It's a wonderful time. Go watch commercials. See all of the things that are promised. Just buy this thing and look at the life you can have. The commercials on TV are simply the parables we tell ourselves about what constitutes a meaningful life. Acquire this possession, and your lack of this possession is what's wrong with your life. But the third thing, the boastful pride of life. We all have a desire for our lives to count, for us to matter, for us to be significant, for us to do something worthwhile, and for it to be matter that we're here. But when that gets distorted, we think that we can't be happy unless we elevate ourselves over other people. That the goal is for me to be better than you. I can't just be good at what I do. I can't just find fulfillment in what I do. I have to be better than you. Something you can actually see in sports, right? It's not enough for me to play the game well or even to win. I have to beat you. I have to find a way to elevate myself over you. But anytime someone thinks I will not be fulfilled unless I'm famous, unless I'm rich, unless I'm the CEO, unless I get promoted, unless I climb the ladder, I've seen people ruin their lives taking a promotion that they shouldn't have got because they were wired for and were made to play at one position, but out of a sense of desire for promotion, the boastful pride of life, they got elevated out of a place of giftedness and into a place of frustration. Anytime you think that I would be better or I am better because I have something, you are looking at the world like this with the boastful pride of life. And it's chiefly what he was doing. Not just that, self-righteousness won't just make you focus on comparison. Self-righteousness will make you focus on earning. Notice, he's not just trying to elevate himself over other people. He thinks he's done it. He thinks he's done it. I'm so glad I'm not like this other person. I look at all the things I have done. Now, please don't misunderstand me. There is effort involved in following Jesus. Go read the New Testament, and you'll see that 3 common words that come about the life in Christ is words like toil, or effort, or labor. There is work involved in following Jesus, but there is difference between effort and earning. The gospel is not opposed to effort. The gospel is opposed to earning. We are supposed to work not to gain God's approval or earn God's blessing, but out of the flow of it, out of the overflow of as God pours his blessing and power into our lives. But he thinks he's earned it. He thinks he deserves everything he has, and he's pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Third, self-righteousness focuses on self. This might sound redundant. This might sound like I'm just, obviously, but it's worth saying. It's worth saying self-righteousness will make you focus on yourself. Notice, he goes to the temple. He mentions God 1 time. He mentions himself 5 times. Right? He goes up. He didn't ask God for anything. All he does, in fact, his prayer sounds less like a prayer and more like a dating profile or like a resume, right? Hey, God, I'm here. You're welcome, right? Look at all the things I can do for your corporation because of all of the things I've achieved in my life already. This is what self-righteousness does. It makes you focus on yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but as I take the test, it kind of hits me. I go, oh, it's kind of like I do compare myself to other people. I do think that my success I would have more success if I could just be at a, better university, a bigger church, a nicer whatever. If I could just have a bigger house or a nicer car, or if I could make a bigger paycheck, if I could have all of these things. And then I console myself, well, at least I'm better than that guy. At least I don't have that. At least I don't have this. At least and then the moment I start doing it, the moment I realize that I am kind of focused on myself, then a voice whispers like, yeah, it's not so bad, Steve. It's not so bad. You're not like the Pharisee. You don't really think you've done it all. Yeah, and we find a way of excusing those categories in our brain of comparison and of earning and of self. And we don't see the dangers. We don't see the danger of self-righteousness. That's what I want to look at next. I want you to see what this passage shows us about the danger of self-righteousness. Okay, and I thought about some of the things I could say. I thought about saying self-righteousness will make you think you don't need God. That's one of the things I thought about saying. Self-righteousness will make you think you don't need God. Because the guy goes to the temple and doesn't ask God for anything. He has earned it all and he deserves it all, and what he has is what he earned, and no one's going to take it away from me, but it's mine. Self-righteousness will make you think you don't need God. But also, self-righteousness will make you think you are God. If you look closely at that passage, verse 11 says, the Pharisee was standing and praying like this about himself. So he was talking about himself. Literally, the Greek there says, could also be translated, he was praying like this to himself. Which is true, right? He mentions God and then says I 5 times. It's reasonable to believe he's talking to himself. His prayer is to himself. Self-righteousness will make you might not believe it, but self-righteousness will make you think you are God. There's an old joke, right? I think Albert Einstein's quoted with saying, the only difference between God and me is God doesn't think he's me. Which is true. But the thing I decided to highlight most of all is self-righteousness makes you blind. Self-righteousness will make you blind. In verse 11, this Pharisee, in his prayer, lists all of the things that he believes are favorable to himself. He says, oh, I'm so glad I'm not greedy. I'm so glad I'm not unrighteous. I'm so glad I'm not an adulterer. And what's crazy is all of those were true of the Pharisees. In Matthew's gospel, Matthew chapter 23, Jesus gives what's the famous so-called woes to the Pharisees. Let me tell you all of the things that the Pharisees get wrong is basically the point. And listen to what he says, right? So the guy says, I'm so glad I'm not greedy. Matthew 23:24, Jesus says, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. He didn't think he was greedy, but he was. Unrighteous. I'm so glad I'm not unrighteous. Matthew 23, verses 27 to 28, Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and every kind of impurity. In the same way, on the outside, you seem righteous to people, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. And then adulterers. Adultery means someone who's not faithful, and it's one of the chief symbols in the Old Testament for spiritual unfaithfulness of Israel to God. Okay, and in Matthew chapter 23, verse 13, Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you don't go in, and you don't allow those entering to go in either. He says, you don't actually go into the kingdom of God, and you prohibit other people from doing it too. He says, you claim to be faithful to God, but you aren't. You're an adulterer. Here's the thing. The Pharisee's self-righteousness had made him blind. He was every one of the things he told God and other people he wasn't. And this is the danger, right? That you will have a sickness that you don't even go get treated for because you don't even know it's a sickness, because you don't see it. It's one of those things, it's one of the most haunting words and diagnoses ever given by Jesus in the whole Bible, and it comes in Revelation chapter 3, verse 17. He's talking to the church at Laodicea, and he describes Laodiceans this way. He says, for you say, I'm rich, I have become wealthy and need nothing, and you don't realize that you are wretched and pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. That's who the Pharisee was. That's the chief problem with the Pharisee. It's not that he had done all this good, but that he didn't recognize his need. He thought he needed nothing and he needed everything. So what's the answer? How do we get out of this? What's the solution? I want to look next at the deliverance from self-righteousness. The deliverance from self-righteousness. Jesus gives it. He goes, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. If you look closely, it's what the tax collector does that shows us the way out of self-righteousness. Verse 13 says, but the tax collector, standing far off and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but kept striking his chest, saying, God have mercy on me, a sinner. Now, please don't misunderstand. What he's not doing is just saying, oh, woe is me, and I'm such a failure. See, that's just the opposite of what the Pharisee is doing. That is still the categories of self and of earning and of comparison. To beat yourself up about how much you failed to earn and how much you don't measure up to the other guy is still the same problem of Pharisaical self-righteousness. You're still a Pharisee. You're just a failed Pharisee. Okay? This isn't about learning to be a failed Pharisee and compare yourself unfavorably. Like, oh, I'm nothing compared to you. I'm nothing compared to him. It's about finding a different way of looking at righteousness. And that's what this tax collector does. Again, I'm going to show you a Greek passage in just a second, but realize that the first thing he shows us is that you have to realize your need. You have to actually realize your need. He goes to the temple that day beating himself up because he's not good enough. He's like the Apostle Paul, who saw a war in his own flesh. He goes, I know the right thing to do, and I don't do it. I know the wrong thing to do, and I end up doing that. And in Romans 7, chapter 24, he says this, what a wretched man am I. Who will rescue me from this body of death? Realize that there is nothing that you can do. But this isn't about comparison. This isn't about I'm comparing you to somebody else. This is about recognizing your need before God, that you are broken and empty and hopeless and a failure, like Jesus said to the church at Laodicea. You recognize your need. But the focus is not on other people. The focus is on God. There's a wonderful, again, another interesting Greek thing. In verse 13, the prayer of this tax collector it says in many Bibles, God have mercy on me, a sinner. Literally, the Greek probably more accurately says, God have mercy on me, the sinner. God have mercy on me, the sinner. He's not saying, compared to everybody else, I'm the worst sinner in the room. That's comparison again. He's not doing that. What he's saying is, God, I've come to you, and in this relationship, I'm the sinner. I'm not going to boast my credentials. I'm not going to tell you what a great gift I am to your organization. I come empty, looking to be filled. I come broken, looking to be healed. I come desiring the life that I don't have. Right? That's what he's doing. He is realizing his need. But second, he is resting in God's nature. He is resting in God's nature. Here's the thing. He's not just at home moping. He's not drowning his sorrows. He's not, oh, woe is me, talking on the couch to a buddy. I can't seem to do right. Oh, my goodness. He's come to the temple to pray. He's resting in the nature of God. He knows he needs something, and he knows where to get it. He's gone to get it, and he expects to get it. There are two wonderful Hebrew words I want to give you, and there are two aspects of God's nature that this man is resting in that are manifest in his prayer. Okay, the first attribute is Sadiq. Sadiq. It's a Hebrew word that means holy. Holy. It means that God is only and completely good. There's not a shred of unrighteousness in him. There's not a shred of injustice. There's just not a shred of any wrongdoing. He is completely good. The other word is chesed. Okay? Now, KH. So you might not be able to make the ch sound. You can say hesed with an H, or you can say kesed with a k. Just don't say chesed, okay? Don't say chesed. But this is allergy season. Just you guys, chesed. It's a word that gets translated in the Old Testament as mercy or as loving kindness. It refers to God's loyal love and commitment to you. Okay? It means that God doesn't break his promises. It means God loves you. See, the man went up there resting in God's nature. He's beating his chest because he's frustrated at the brokenness of his own life. He's frustrated at his continual failure. he's beating his chest. He can't look up to heaven because he knows that God is Sadiq. He knows that God is holy. He knows that God will never change his mind about what constitutes right and wrong. But he's come to the temple and he begs for mercy because he also knows that God is chesed. He knows that God never tires in showing his abundant mercy and loving kindness. In the same way that God will never change his mind about what constitutes right and wrong, he will never change his mind about how much he loves you, and he has more mercy. He has more mercy than you have mess. That song we sang, our sins they are many, his mercy is more. The Pharisee went there, didn't think he needed anything, and he walked away with exactly what he wanted, nothing. The tax collector came broken, came recognizing that God is holy and that he failed. And he also came recognizing that God is a loving God and desires to show mercy. And he walked away in right relationship. He walked away fulfilled. He walked away relying upon the right thing to find meaning and purpose and life and joy in this world. How's this hitting you today? Have you noticed the signs of self-righteousness? Have you played the Pharisee a little more than you realize? Maybe not as successful. Maybe you're a failed Pharisee. But maybe that the attributes of Pharisaical self-righteousness are still manifest in your life. Do you see that comparison that still eats at you, that you compare yourself to other people, maybe in a negative or a good way? Maybe you say, look, I'm so much better than that person. Who is somebody you think right now? At least I'm not that person. More importantly, who do you think, if I could just be that person, then maybe I would be fulfilled and happy and meaningful and content? It's a lie. Also, how much do you think you have to earn? How many times have you attributed your failure to, I guess God doesn't love me because I've sinned and therefore I'm no good? How many times do you think that God doesn't hear your prayers because your sin stands in the way? God knows you're a sinner. God's begging you to come to him to lay it down. Let's pray. Well, thank you for this powerful picture of what it means to serve you. Father, show us all the ways in which self-righteousness filters into our lives, all the ways in which we think that exalting ourselves and focusing on earning and comparison will actually lead us to fulfillment. Show us the lie in all of it, and all the ways we've been successful at it, and all the ways we fail, all the ways in which it manifests itself in our anxiety and our depression, our anxiety that it's all up to us, and our depression when we fail. Father, thank you. Thank you that you never change your mind about what constitutes right and wrong. Thank you that life can only be found in one place. The peace and joy and fulfillment, contentment that we long for and try to find in all these other dead ends are only found in one place. Thank you that it's found in Jesus. But also thank you that when we break our lives searching in all those other places, you never tire in welcoming us back home. Impress upon our hearts both that you are Sadiq, that you are holy, but also impress upon our hearts that you are Chesed. You desire to be merciful to us. You desire to fill us up with what we're lacking. You desire to heal what's diseased in us. You desire to fill up what's empty. Father, may we cease striving and know that you are God. I pray this in your Son's name. Amen.